Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a really fun tutorial for you. We're going to be making this really super cute quilted textbook cover, and you can make these to cover just about anything. They have these fun little pockets inside for the flaps, and you can also store stuff in there. You can use these to cover those composition notebooks that are kind of like meh on the outside, or your school textbooks, or a journal, or whatever you want to use them for. So if you want to see how to make these, let's take a closer look and get started. So the materials for this project are pretty easy. I'm going to be using a little mini charm pack. This one is Gooseberry by Moda, and it's just got really cute colors. You could always just cut your own pieces. You can use really any size you want. We're just doing a simple patchwork, so as long as your squares are the same size, you'll get a patchwork look. You'll also need a composition notebook or some other notebook that you want to cover. You'll need a flexible measuring tape, some pins. You'll need some batting, some backing, and then some extra fabric for the little flaps to hold in the front of your cover. You'll need a rotary trimmer, some scissors, a ruler, and a cutting mat, and then of course an ironing board with an iron and your sewing machine. Other than that, you don't need any special supplies or anything, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is measure your textbook, and you're going to want to use your flexible measuring tape, and you just start at one side, measure it, leave your book folded, measure all the way around and back out the other side, and mark that with your finger, and then you'll see that that's 15 inches. So we're going to add 2 inches to the width of our textbook just to allow room for error, and so that we're going to trim this all up when we're done to make sure that it fits exactly. And then you're going to measure the height of your book, and for us that's about 9 3/4 of an inch. I'm just going to go ahead and make it 10 just to make it easy. And so we're going to add, this one you only really need to add about 1 inch to, so we're going to make it about 11 inches. Alright, so the next thing that you're going to want to do then is to just trim your batting. And I have already cut my batting so that it is 17 inches wide by 11 inches high, and actually this one's a little bit taller than that, but it's fine. And then I also did that with my backing, and I just cut them at the same time, so just to save time. So you're just going to want to pre-cut that, fold them up, and just set them aside for later. Okay, so the next thing that we need to cut are the little flaps that are going to hold our notebook cover onto our actual notebook. And for that, you want it to be 8 inches wide, and then by whatever your vertical measurement was, and ours was 11 inches. So I'm going to get my ruler here and turn it so I can read it. We're going to have 8 inches by 11, and you just want to line up that line on your fabric. And since these two I can see are not quite square, I'm actually going to scoot it over just a little bit, and then I'll trim that off. We'll flip it over and trim it. So you just hold it down. Make a nice cut there, and then cut along the top. And like I said, these sides were a little bit off, so I'm just going to flip it over and again measure, line up my 8 and my 11, and then just trim off any excess I have here. And there we are, ready for that. Now we're actually going to take these over to our ironing board, and we're just going to iron them in half. And then we're going to just run a straight stitch, or you can do a decorative stitch. You can even do a different color if you want, just to make it kind of fancy, down the edge of this, just to kind of make it look a little bit more professional. And then we're going to do the same thing with this one. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I just brought these over to my ironing board, and I just folded them in half, and then I'm just going to quickly run that along the edge just to kind of straighten out that seam for me, so that when I take it over to my sewing machine, I'm sewing nice and straight. Okay, so here we are at my sewing machine, and I have brought my 2 side flaps over here, and I decided to do a red stitch because I thought it might be kind of cute. You can just do whatever you want, but I'm just going to do a little decorative. This is going to be a straight stitch just because, but I think the thread will suffice for decorative stitching. And we're just going to run a 1/4 of an inch seam, and as you can see, I'm keeping my material lined up with the 1/4 inch foot on my machine. I'm not going to cut it or anything. I'm just going to go ahead and run in the very next one right behind it. And there we go. Now I'm just going to trim these apart and set those aside for later. All right, so once I have my final layout, or what I think is my final layout, I'll take a quick picture with my camera, usually on my phone, just to kind of make sure. Sometimes when you see things in a picture, you notice, you know, things that you might not notice otherwise. Like, for example, I have a couple of dark blues together, so I'll probably try and rearrange those a little bit, and so on. So once you're happy with your layout, the next thing that you're going to do is chain piece these together. So we're going to take this row and flip it right sides together on to this row, and then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch down the seam, and we're going to continue on down this all the way. And so what I'll normally do is I'll do like one whole row at a time, flipping them over like so, and then to keep them in order, I'll take my first one on top, and then I just kind of stack them, and these are the order they're going to go through my machine in. So I'll take this little stack over and start on this one, and I just keep on sewing. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so here we are at my machine, and I'm just going to do a straight stitch on these, and I'm going to take my little stack off my first pile and just make sure they're lined up nice and neat. I don't normally pin this kind of stuff, but you can if you want. And you're just going to run it along your machine at a 1/4 inch. When it gets to this point, I don't cut my thread or anything. I just get my next little bunch of fabric together and keep sewing. Grab the next one and keep on going. And we're just going to continue all the way down this first row, and we're going to do that with all of the remaining rows. There we go. All right, now I will cut the end of that since we're at the end of that row, and just kind of set this row to the side. But as you can see, I'm not going to cut any of these little pieces in the middle, and I'll show you why in a little bit. Alright, I am back over at my cutting board now, and as you can see, I have sewed all of my rows together, and if you'll notice, they're like little flags now, so you can just kind of open them up like so, and you can open them all up across, and you should hopefully be in the same order that you were before. If not, I mean, it's no big deal. You can pick your stitches if you want. I usually kind of just, you know, go with it. But as you open these all up, then you'll have your next rows ready to sew together. And so what I'll do next is I'll actually fold this row, the second row that I'm working on right here, on top of this row and sew down all of those. So for example, I'll take this, flip it on top of this row, and continue all the way down. It's a little tricky because they're tied together, but you'll thank me for leaving these tied together later on when we go to sew the rows together. Makes it a lot easier, and it actually kind of keeps everything in order. If this is too confusing for you, you're welcome to cut it. I find that this actually helps me keep things in order just slightly better. So now I would take this whole kind of pile over and then just stitch down a 1/4 inch again on all of these, and then I'll open up this row and then lay this row down on top of it and do the same thing with that row. And then once I have those two together, we'll come back and we'll stitch our next two sections back together. So here we go. As you can see, I've got rows 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4 back to back, or right sides together. We're going to go ahead and just go down our little row, stitching these guys together, and then I'm just going to stop when I get here and make sure that these two are straightened out nice and straight, and then we'll run those through again. We're not going to cut our stitches, we're just going to keep on sewing. Hopefully this makes sense to you and it's not too confusing, but this is one of the easiest ways I've found to kind of put patchwork blocks together. Okay. Alright, so your project should now be looking like this. We've got all 4 first rows stitched together, and they're still joined by their little chain stitching pieces in the middle, and that's going to really help us when we go to fold this over and attach this row to this row. They'll just stay in order nice and neat. So next thing we're going to do is take this row, flip it over, and sew it down the edges to this right here. Alright, so your project should be looking like this. We've added all of our rows and they're all still stitched together, and then we just have our last row to add, and then we'll press it. Alright, that is our last row, so we'll take it over to the ironing board and press our rows. Okay, so we're back over at my ironing board, and I've kind of laid my rows out like this. And then what we're going to do so that we can nest our seams is we're going to iron our seams going opposite directions. So for example, for this row, we're going to iron everything going this way, and then this row we'll iron them all going this way, and then this row will go this way, and this row will go this way, and so on. So in order to do that, because it's kind of hard, I actually pull it so that it's dangling off of my board for this first row, and the rest of them are kind of dangling off of my ironing board here, like so, and that just makes it a little bit easier to hit just one row. So here we go. I'm just going to kind of give it a little tug so that I'm making sure that we are getting nice good seams. I'm just going to go all the way down. Alright, so we've got this first row going this way. The next row we're going to iron our seams going this way, and I've got the rest of it kind of hanging off down here so it's out of my way. Sorry about that. And I'm just going to hang on to it, and we're going to do the same thing, and just be mindful of your seams up here. You might have to kind of lift and press as opposed to run your iron, just so you're not accidentally pressing those other seams. And if you do, you can just fix them really quickly. It's not a big deal. I usually just kind of pat them down like that. We're just going to continue doing that for the rest of our rows. So we'll just pull this up for the next row, and then this row needs to go this way. Alright, so we have it all nice and ironed out, and our rows are still separated, but they're joined by these little strings, so we know that we're in the right order and all of that jazz. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start joining this row to this row and so on. So to do that, we're just going to flip this row upside down, and I usually start with the middle seam. We're going to take our pins, and we're going to nest our seams. And since we ironed this seam going this way and this seam going this way, you can kind of feel them, but they'll just lock right together like that. And I'll show you, I'll try and get an up close of this. But you're going to just pin right there just to keep those seams lined up. And I like to pin at every junction. Some people like to just kind of line them up as they go, and that's fine too, whatever works best for you. Okay, so as you can see, here's the two seams with this seam going this way and this seam kind of going that way, and you just want to press them together so that they're kind of touching, and that's just called nesting your seams. They kind of just lock together, and then you can just stick a pin in there to hold them in place, and then I just do this all the way down. Again, you see this one going that way and this one going that way, and you'll just again nest them together, and you kind of just can squish them with your fingers until you can feel them touching. You'll be able to tell if they're on top of each other because you'll feel like a lump. If they're not, if they're in the right spot, then it'll be nice and smooth. You'll feel that seam nice and smooth. And I usually start in the middle, and you can kind of grab them like this and just kind of push until they touch like so. I usually start in the middle and then work my way out to the ends. We're just going to continue doing that all the way down this row, and then we're going to take it to our machine and do a 1/4 inch stitch all the way along this top edge, and then we're going to repeat this process, joining all of the remaining layers together. So here we are. I've just carefully carried this whole thing over to my machine, and I'm just going to line up these corners. I didn't pin the corners. It's not really necessary. You kind of just can line it up when you get there. There's no need to really backstitch or anything like that because we're going to be stitching around the edge of this, so we're just going to go ahead and do a straight stitch like normal, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, some machines can handle sewing over pins like that, some machines can't. Depending on what I'm doing, I will take out my pins. A lot of times I just keep going right over them. I know that's a good way to break a needle, so I don't want to encourage you guys to sew over your pins, but yeah, that's just how I roll. Okay. Okay. All right, and so now we can take out these pins and you can iron this open now if you like, or you can just bring this back over to the board And as you'll see, you should have a nice corner right here because you pinned those seams. So that's my trick for getting straight corners. It doesn't, you know, every now and then you'll have something that gets off, but that's my trick, is to just wherever you have those seams, nest them together and pin them, and you should always come up with like a nice point right there, and it'll look really nice when we go and iron that. So I'm going to take this back over to my mat and flip it over and pin the next row. And here we are. I've flipped over the row that I just sewed onto my next row. Right sides together, start in the middle. You can see your seams nesting. They're going to be going the opposite direction they were last time. Just put those guys together, pin them, and you're going to do this for the entire rest of your top, quilt top. Okay, so here we are back on my little ironing board, and we've got all of these rows nicely completed, as you can see. And then we just need to iron it out. And so I kind of like to just set my stitches really quickly like that, and then I will just iron up along the edges. And some people like to press their seams open. You can do that, or you can kind of just run it like this. It just depends. If you're having a issue with it staying, I suggest steam. That really can help, especially when you have this many seams coming together at once. And so you're just going to kind of continue on like that. Just fold it over, set your stitches, and then press. And I just kind of do this all the way down, and I'm just trying to make sure that my seams are going up since I have a few rows here. But see how nice that's turning out? It's going to be super cute. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is baste our quilt. And I like to use the 505 fabric adhesive. I find that this one works the best. I've tried some less expensive brands, and I've even tried some, like Joann's in particular. I'm sorry, Joann's, but your spray base didn't hold my big quilt, and it got like all crinkly and crazy on the back. So I like this one. This is my favorite one, so we're going to use that. Normally I would do this outside, but since I'm working inside for a video, you're just going to want to cover your surface with some paper towel. Alright, and then we're going to add our backing, or our front side, I mean. So I cut mine a little bit bigger, but you're just going to want to make sure that give yourself a little bit of space on the outsides, just so that, you know, if anything moves or anything like that. So I'll usually kind of position it where I want it, flip it up, and then I spray my basting. Some people spray their fabric. I don't know. I think it works either way. But then you just kind of do that, get it on there, and then do the other side. And you can do either, doesn't matter. I don't like to have overspray on my front, so that's why I usually spray my basting, or my backing, and not my fabric. My batting, sorry, not my fabric. Alright, so once that's on there nice and good, you can kind of give it a little shake and just test it. Looks like it's on there, and we're ready to quilt. Okay, so we're at our machine, and you want to make sure that you have enough thread and also a full bobbin to start out with, because it's just a bummer to run out of bobbin like in the middle of your project. This shouldn't take too much, but since it's a patchwork, I think I'm going to just do straight line quilting on this. I can do a tutorial on free motion quilting, and I can do that in a separate video. So for this one, I just thought it might be more attractive to kind of follow my lines here. So I'm going to just start out. Usually I kind of start out in the middle and then work my way out to the end. And so I think this one looks like a good place to start. And just to keep things straight, I'm going to line up this seam with the edge of my foot. I'll do that all the way down. We'll turn around and come back up, and then do the same thing. That way my stitching is kind of in the same spot. And then I'll probably do a horizontal one as well. You don't need a special foot for this. You just need to kind of hang on to it. The spray basting holds everything nice and tight. So I really like that. Plus you're not having to mess around with you know, changing your foot out and stuff like that. Now when you come to an end, I have a needle down on my machine. If you don't have that, you're going to just want to use the hand crank and just push your needle down so that it's holding your quilt. Raise up your presser foot, and then just travel on the edge till you get to the next one. Oops, I went too far. You can go back. Alright, no harm, no foul, and head down the other side. And we're just going to repeat this process for the entire rest of the quilt. So we're at the edge. It doesn't matter if you go off the edge here for your stitching. We're just traveling. All right. I'm going a little bit too far. Okay, there we go. We're going to go down the other side. And I just keep lining up that seam along the right side of my presser foot, just to make it kind of symmetrical. If you like, you can also draw lines with a water-soluble pen or whatever works for you. Something that's going to come off in the wash, or if this is not a project you're going to wash, like this book cover probably won't wash. You can also do it with the friction pins, which you can iron them off. The heat makes them disappear. They will come back if your quilt or your project gets cold, so just heads up on that. But for these little projects, they work just fine, or eyeballing it works just fine as well. So we're going to just continue this all the way through the rest of this project, and then I'll pick back up with you when I'm all done. Alright, so here we are. We've got our pieced top nice and quilted onto our batting, and the next thing that we're going to do is just trim it all up. So like I told you before, you're going to want to leave about 1/4 of an inch on the top and bottom, and then on each side. And so before I start cutting anything, I just like to kind of fold it over and make sure like I have enough fabric, just to make sure that it's going to fit and all of that good stuff. So we are going to trim this up. Okay, so I've got out my ruler, and I apologize for the glare. It's starting to get a little bit dark, so I had to turn on my light. But I'm just going to line up one of the lines on my ruler along with my stitching line here, or my seam line. Either one is fine. And just so that I kind of get a straight cut, and I'm just going to trim off one of these edges so that I have something that I know is straight that I can work with. So I'm just going to take off just a little bit off that edge, and now that allows me to have a straight line to be able to trim up these top sides. And if I'm at, and I'm just chopping off the excess down here. Okay. Alright, so here we have our completed quilted top, and that looks really cute. Our next step is to assemble our book cover. So we're going to take our 2 pieces of like background fabric that we use to make our pockets, and if you did a decorative stitch, you're going to want to put that face down. So I did a red just for fun, and I'm going to put that face down. You're going to want the sewn side going towards the center of your book cover, and then the raw edge going against the raw edge of your quilted piece. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side, again with the decorative stitch facing down, and then the raw edges to the raw edges. And then you're going to take your background piece, and you're going to want to put that right side down. So right side touching right side. It's kind of, doesn't really matter for me because I just used a solid. But if you haven't used a solid, you're going to want to do the right sides together. Because then what we're going to do is sew, leaving about a 3 or 4 inch gap down here. We're going to sew all the way around the edge of these layers, and stopping here, we're going to leave this gap unstitched so that we can turn our work. So we're going to go ahead, I'm just going to go ahead and pin it in a couple of spots just so that it kind of holds together and doesn't move around on me. You'll definitely kind of want to put a couple of pins in where these pockets are just so they don't move. And of course, as you're stitching around, you're going to want to make sure that you've got your pocket in your stitch mark. And I'm going to use probably just about 1/4 of an inch stitching all the way around. You don't want to go too much more than that because that's about what allowance we allowed ourselves when we cut this, and if you do too much more, then it won't fit on your book. I poked myself with a pin. It happens. Alright, last one. Okay, so we're going to take this over, and actually what I'm going to do, just so that I know where to stop and start, is I'm going to put a starter. And then I usually try and find a red pin. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but I usually have a green for my go and a red for my stop, and that way I know when I hit it that I need to stop at that spot. It's just a good reminder. Okay, so here we are at my machine, and I'm at my starter pin, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull that one out. And I'm going to do a little back stitch here just because, you know, we're going to be turning it, and I don't want to tear it or anything like that, and it will have a little bit of pressure on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to run a nice 1/4 of an inch stitch all the way around the outside until I get to my other red pin indicating for me to stop. If you have to go a little bit slower because it's a lot of layers, please do so. When you get to the corner, drop your needle, lift up your presser foot, and just turn it. And then you can keep on going. right, now we're going to do a back stitch here. Alright, so here is our piece. Here's our little turn opening. And then before I do that, I'm just going to take my corners and just trim them off. You want to get close as you can to your stitches, but not through your stitches. So you're going to do that on all 4 corners. Just trim right up next to your stitch. And all you're really doing is making sure that you don't have a lot of bulk in these corners when you turn it right side out. Alright, so I clipped all of my corners, and then you're just going to open up your hole here with the backing and the front, and then just carefully kind of start turning it inside out. And it just takes a little bit of patience. I only left about 3 inches. I'm almost wishing I left a slightly bigger hole, but I think we'll be okay here. Last step is going to be to run a top stitch around this whole thing, and what that will do is seal up our hole from when we flipped it, and then just give it kind of a finished look. Okay, so here's our project kind of flipped out. It's still a little bit puffy. Here's our opening, and we'll take care of that in a second. And then if you flip it over, you'll have your pockets on the back side. And so our next step is to just take this over, and I kind of like to take it to the ironing board and just press in a 1/4 inch seam on the white, and it's almost kind of already done for you because we sewed it. The batting one is just slightly harder, so you might need to just fold it slightly, and then you might even stick just a couple of pins in there. I'm going to iron it first. That'll help give it a straighter edge. And then what we're going to do is take this whole thing over to our sewing machine and just do a kind of a close to the edge top stitch around it just to kind of finish it off. The white is actually already folded over, so all I really need to do is fold over my quilted side and just kind of hit that as well. I'll do it on this side. Just kind of tuck it under. Just give it a good press right there. Okay, so here we are back over at my machine, and I am actually going to handle my little opening here first, just so that I know that I've got it. That's just going to be the hardest spot. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a back stitch just to get started, and then I'm slowly going to go around this edge, and I'm not even really doing a 1/4 inch. I want to say it's probably closer to 1/8 inch around the edges. That's just because I want to make sure I get my opening. And it's just like a finishing stitch. So you'll want to kind of take your time going around these corners. Same as always, when you get to the edge, just leave your needle down, pick up your presser foot, and keep on going. And you might need to kind of just slow down for this because you are going through quite a few edges. Okay, so here we have our completed front side, and then here's our completed back side. Everything's nice and finished off. If you have any little extra threads hanging out, you can trim those. You'll want to make sure that you kind of got your hole sewed together there, but since this is a book cover, it's not like super critical. And then you can just fold this in half and add your notebook to it, and you're good to go. The other little option my daughter was kind of wanting me to add to this, well, I'm not sure if we will or not, but is a ribbon just to kind of wrap around and tie it to make it cute. So you could always just stitch, do a couple of straight stitches or whatever to attach a ribbon that is long enough to go around and then tie. That would be really cute. And then I also have a tutorial for another one we did, which was this one, that had like a little elastic with a button. And so that's also another cute option. Alright guys, so here's our super cute journal cover. I hope you enjoyed this project, and if you make it, make sure to tag me on social media. I would love to see your projects. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me at erica@confessionsofahomeschooler.com, and you can also check out my website and my YouTube channel, obviously, for more fun tutorials. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time.